All right, let's talk about diabetes. You've almost certainly heard of type 1 and type 2, but what really sets them apart? It can be pretty confusing, so we're going to break it all down. But first, just imagine this for a second. What if your body's amazing fuel delivery system, the whole process that gets energy to every single cell, just broke down? What happens when the fuel can't get where it needs to go?
Well, that's pretty much the central problem we're talking about with diabetes.
So let's get right to the heart of it. It all boils down to sugar. More specifically, it's about what happens when the very fuel that's supposed to power your body turns into a threat just by being in the wrong place. So what is diabetes, really? Well, officially, it's a set of conditions where your blood glucose, your blood sugar, is way too high. And while sugar is definitely energy, having it just floating around in your blood instead of inside your cells, well, that can cause some really serious, sometimes even life-threatening health problems.
But, before we dive into what goes wrong, it's super important to understand how the system is supposed to work. And honestly, when it's working right, it's this incredibly elegant process. The best way to think about it is like a simple lock and key.
So here's how it's meant to go. First, you eat something and your body breaks that food down into glucose. Think of glucose as the energy package. Seeing that glucose, your pancreas kicks into gear and produces a hormone called insulin. That's our key. This insulin key then travels through your bloodstream, finds a cell, and fits perfectly into a receptor on that cell's surface. That's the lock on the door. Once the key is in the lock, the door swings open, and the glucose can get inside the cell to be used for energy. It's a perfect system.
Okay, so that's the ideal. Now for the first way that whole system can break down. With type 1 diabetes, the problem is all about the key. It's not the lock, it's not the door, it's the fact that the factory that makes the keys has basically been shut down. So what's going on here? Well, type 1 is actually an autoimmune condition. For reasons we don't fully understand, the body's own immune system gets confused and attacks the very cells in the pancreas that produce insulin, destroying them. So the factory can't make the keys anymore. You've got all this glucose fuel in your blood, but you've got no keys to unlock the cell doors. And the result? All that glucose gets locked out and just builds up and up in the bloodstream, which is, of course, very dangerous.
Now, let's talk about the second major way things can go wrong. Type 2 diabetes. This time, the key factory is humming along just fine. The pancreas is making insulin. The problem isn't the key, it's the lock. This is what doctors call insulin resistance. The keys are there, they're circulating, but when they get to the cell doors and try to fit in the locks, nothing happens. It's like the locks have gotten all rusted and jammed. The cells just don't respond. And so, just like in type 1, the glucose can't get in. It gets stranded in the blood, leading to the exact same problem of high blood sugar, but for a completely different reason. So we've got two fundamentally different failures, right? One where you have no keys, and another where the locks are basically broken. It makes sense then that how we figure out which one it is and how we manage them are also going to be pretty different. And this chart just lays out the contrast perfectly. For type 1, that missing key problem, the onset is usually pretty sudden and it often happens young, before age 20. The cause is that immune system attack, and the management is straightforward. You have to supply the missing keys. That means regular insulin injections. On the flip side, you have type 2, the rusted lock problem. This one tends to be more gradual, typically showing up after age 30, and it's really heavily linked to lifestyle and genetics. So management is all about trying to get those rusted locks working again through things like diet, weight loss, and exercise. Okay, so we have these two really distinct types of diabetes. One is an autoimmune issue, and the other is mostly driven by lifestyle. So the big question is, which one is more common out there in the world?
And the answer is, well, it's not even close. Type 2 diabetes absolutely dominates, making up about 85%, some sources say up to 90% of all diabetes cases. So that rusted lock problem, the one tied to lifestyle, is by far the most common form of this condition.
And just for a complete picture, it's worth quickly mentioning two other related conditions. You might hear about prediabetes. That's basically a warning sign where your blood sugar is high, but not quite in the diabetic range yet. And there's also gestational diabetes, which is a temporary type that can affect women during pregnancy, but usually goes away after the baby's born.
And to really hammer this point home, a key takeaway from one of our sources is this quote right here. It is believed that lifestyle plays a very important role in type 2. This just reinforces the idea that how we eat, how much we weigh, and how active we are can be huge factors in developing the most common form of diabetes.
So that kind of leaves us with this final thought.
With type 2 being so incredibly common and so closely linked to our daily habits, it really seems like the way we live is becoming just as powerful as any pill a doctor could prescribe. And the real question that raises is, what does that mean for the future of our health?